Morning, happy Wednesday, everyone. I received a voicemail about 5 minutes ago from a law office out of Chicago that needed the link. Is anyone from Chicago on the WebEx meeting this morning and still need the link to be sent to another colleague? Can you guys hear me?
This is Miles Berman in Chicago. I have the link.
Okay.
And my partner, Bill McKenna, has not let me know that he doesn't have it. I'll email him. Bill, are you on? We got the same meeting invite, so I suspect he's got it, but I'll check with him.
Do you know the number? Is it the 586-838-8687? Is that his office number?
That would not be. Our numbers are 312, and then the first three digits are 832.
Okay, well, I don't know who this is.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's see. Give us a few more minutes. I'm waiting on another board member to log on.
Mr. or Carmel, this is Patty. Do we have Mr. Bradley as well?
Give me 1 second.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I have all members here. Mr. Chairman, you can go ahead. Mr. Gallagher?
You're muted, Mr. Gallagher.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Rulins?
Yes.
Yes, we need you to put up our preamble.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Okay, in compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and section 101.021 of the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the city planning department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raise hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raise hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you, and be sure to select the unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. C, call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities being recorded by way of the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed by way of YouTube. All requests to speak in a particular matter by way of our website and email have been considered. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. Ms. Ashton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we can have Mr. Rulons verify it's being live streamed on YouTube?
I can verify that.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Chairman, as we do each time, the city objects to the use of the chat function, as we have since the beginning of the pandemic, based upon the rules promulgated on the Ohio Supreme Court's website and guidance. The city does object to that use, and that if we were still meeting in person in room 514, the board would not be having side chats function. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Davis?
Mr. Maschke,
Here.
Mr. Bradley, you have to unmute your mic, Mr. Bradley. Mr. Dink,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here. Is Mr. Maskey is still, Mr. Bradley is still on mute?
This is Patty. I see his name and I see on the side it does still say muted.
I'm not sure what device he's on, but you can, *6 if you need to unmute Mr. Bradley.
It looks like he's on the computer according to the icon.
Okay.
I'm sending a request to unmute. I do not have the ability to unmute him myself, or I would.
Okay, he has left the meeting. Let's see when he's come back on again.
One second, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is Patty. I do see Councilman Stars is logged on. I don't know if he had any matters that were previously scheduled that have been continued, or if he's just observing, just to let you know that I do see a councilman logged on.
Oh, the councilman is logged on. Okay.
Mr.
I don't know, I
Chairman.
don't see on the dockets that one was scheduled, but just to acknowledge the councilman's presence and that.
Okay,
I don't know that, I'll leave it to the councilman, but I don't know if he got the updated agenda, that it's just the adjudication order and the fire notices. Just for you to be aware, I do see a councilman logged on.
okay. Okay, so
Mr. Chairman.
he can hear you. He's still on mute, but yeah, he may be here for one of the other cases and they've been rescheduled, so that's a possibility.
No, he's probably here just observing.
Oh, and that could be too, and if that's
They
the
have
case,
been updated of the revised agenda. We probably just gonna have to, until we work out the technical issues with Mr. Bradley's mic. You probably have to,
we'll proceed with the first case and I'll make that statement for Miss Ashton. Okay.
Thank you. And if Mr. Bradley, I don't know if he could call in on a separate line as well.
we're working on
Thank you,
that now.
Carmela. I figured. Thank you.
I have two calling users. If you are calling in on the phone, could you please identify yourself as to which case you are here for?
Carmela, one of the two is me.
Okay, so you're calling user number 3, and then I have one other person on the phone that called in. If you do not state what you're here for, you will be booted out of the meeting.
Okay, I see Councilman has left the meeting.
Here, Patty, put him on blast.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge, I wasn't sure if he had something.
Oh, boy.
Everybody can observe. I don't care. I just want to make sure we acknowledged him if he had something.
Right. Okay, well, while we're waiting for that little technical difficulty with one of the board members, we can go ahead with the first case. At this point, right now, we only have 3 board members, which means that if our decision is not unanimous, which it usually is, then your appeal goes back to the city. If for that reason you prefer not to have your case heard, then let me know when we call your case that you would like to reschedule your case. So the first case before us, okay, is A5922, 16810 Bradgate Avenue.
Application and fees are in order. This is an adjudication order to CBC 3117.03H. Present for the hearing is Tom Vanover, Department of Building and Housing, Patricia Ashton Law. We also have a neighbor who called in who wants to give testimony. If you can please state your name for the record, as well as the owners, or well as the appellants for the docket.
Good morning. My name is Rick Bednar. I'm the neighbor.
Mr. Bettner, could you please give us your address?
16807 Truax Avenue.
Thank you.
And the appellants?
This is
Kathy?
Kathy Denis. I'm here too.
Okay. All right, solemnly swear to tell the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go ahead, Kathy, you go ahead and give your testimony.
We are looking to put in a 24-foot round pool behind our garage, which would put the pool 9 feet from the property line on the outer edge of the curve, which is what we are requesting the variance for.
Okay, Any other particulars?
We're having it professionally installed. It's a 54-foot deep pool, just a regular above ground pool.
Okay. Is there a deck gonna go around it,
Eventually, we will put a deck around it.
all sides?
Yes. And we are planning on putting a privacy fence between our property and the neighbor behind us. I'm sure you
Okay, maybe we'll move on. Let's see. We want to hear from Mr. Vanover first.
Mr. Chairman, yes, so this is just initially just for some explanation, and then I'd like to hear the neighbor's objection. This is the building code does require pools to be 10 feet from the neighboring property. We don't get these often, but with the size of the city lots.
From the garage. Okay. From your garage to the garage.
Maurice, can you mute caller number 4, please? 1 second. Thank you.
I'll be out there at the moment.
Okay, we have that muted for Mr.
There we go. So yeah, so the building code, local building code does require that the pool be 10 feet from the property line. With Cleveland lots, that's oftentimes not possible. This is 9 feet, it appears, 3 feet from the garage and then 8 foot from the rear yard. From a building standpoint, we don't have any objection to this. We don't have any objection.
Okay, so then we will need to hear from the neighbor, Mr. Bednar.
Good morning again. I do not have any objections. I was just more interested in understanding what the plan was going to look like, the location of the pool, future plans, things like that. So actually in support of the pool, I just didn't have any details. So thank you.
There you go. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the neighbor has said, okay, so Mr. Vanover, we'll go back to you again.
Yeah, this is, Mr. Chairman, I really don't know why this is a building code issue, as opposed to a zoning code issue, but it is codified in the local residential building code. So,
Okay.
From a building standpoint, we don't have any objection.
Okay, so we're getting no objection from the city, no objection from the neighbors. So I guess a motion would be in order to grant the variance of 1 foot from the property lines for the pool to go ahead and exist.
So moved.
What
Second.
question?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, to Tom Vanover. In the adjudication order, your plan examiner also required additional information for pool and filtration system and the pool height. Do you want those specified in the resolution, or the permit will be pending once you all receive that information? Because right now, all we hearing is about the property line issue.
So, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Davis, my understanding is that the only variance requested from the adjudication order is the location of the pool.
Okay.
So all of those other, all of the other items on the adjudication order will have to be satisfied. Once the variance is granted, those items will have to be satisfied prior to approval.
Thank you. I just wanted that clear for the record.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Maskey.
Second.
Yeah, on mute. Okay, second by Mr. Denk.
Mr. Maskey,
Yes.
Mr. Dank,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes. Okay, So that is passed, and you'll be getting notice of that within 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're done. You're good to go.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have all board members present. I don't know if, at the time, if we need to take a break at this time for 5 minutes for anyone needing to use the restroom. Does
Mr. Chairman,
anyone?
this is Patty. I will defer to the board. I will be as succinct as I possibly can be, given the nature of the next two dockets.
Okay.
I know you all know what that means, but I promise. That's why we filed everything preliminarily.
Okay. Well, is there?
I'm good to go.
You're good?
I am as well. I'm fine.
Okay. Is there anybody that needs the break? If I'm not hearing anything, we're going to go ahead and proceed. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could verify that I have Lieutenant Telbin, the city's fire marshal, as well as Lieutenant Mike Kelly on. I just want to verify that they are on.
Okay. Respond. Okay, so Telbin and Kelly, are they both on?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
are you, all right, are you together?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, so we've got that, Patty. You're set.
Thank you. I'm having a
Okay.
little feedback, but I don't know if that's from Mr. Bradley's phone because it keeps popping green on mine, but I'm okay. I'm glad Mr. Bradley's with us, so.
Okay, Mr. Bradley, if you can mute. All right, so if there's no objection, unless there is, that we'll call both dockets together. It's the same issue.
The city would request that you do so, even if there is going to be an objection. There's no objection on behalf of the city. I will defer to counsel for each appellant whether or not they object to that, but the city believes that it's appropriate given this matter.
Yeah, this is Brandon Brown, counsel for Menzies Aviation. There's no objection on our behalf. And in fact, we would support that.
Okay. No object. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is Amy Johnston on behalf of United Airlines. And we do not have an objection to combining them for purposes of this hearing.
Okay, so we got a green light to go. Let's go ahead and we'll call both A6422, 5900 Cargo Road, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, 5300 Riverside Drive. We're going to call that, and A6422B, same location.
Application fees are in order. This is a notice of violation abatement order issued by the Division of Fire. Present for the hearing, we have Tom Vanover, Department of Building and Housing. Patricia Ashton, Department of Law. With the Division of Fire personnel, please state your name for the record.
Lieutenant Dave Talbin, Fire Marshal, City of Cleveland.
Lieutenant Michael Kelly, hazmat specialist, Cleveland Fire.
With the representatives from United Airlines, please state your name for the record.
Amy Johnston, hearing on behalf of United Airlines.
And good morning, David Terry, General Manager for United Airlines here in Cleveland.
And will the personnel or representative from Menzies Aviation, please state your name for the record.
Yes, I am Brandon Brown. I'll be acting as counsel for Menzies Aviation USA.
Okay, everybody just.
Mr. Chairman, if you can hold one second.
Okay.
You can hold 1 second.
One more here. Mike Bowen, counsel for Menzies Aviation USA Incorporated.
Okay.
And the city would ask, is there an individual other than counsel for Menzies present to give testimony?
Brad Keith, Menzies Aviation, Senior Vice President of Risk.
Okay. Okay, so I ask you to solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God.
Yes.
I didn't hear anyone say yes. Okay.
Yes.
So the city's going to wait for everybody to say yes as required,
All right, we're just
Yes.
okay.
including our own people, Talbot and Kelly.
Talbot says yes.
Lieutenant Kelly said that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, the city also has Shirley Tomasello on behalf of the City of Cleveland Law Department also she's on this with me. I am lead though, and everything I will be handling the hearing, but Shirley Tomasello is also part of this. So the
Okay.
record is clear. She's one of our lawyers present. Thank you, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, I guess, let's see, as far as,
May I, on behalf of the city, may I suggest Mr. Chairman?
what did you want to suggest?
I will suggest that the appeals before this board are objections only. We did file our responses and certifications. If you'd like, I will jump in and do my usual. These are objections only. Therefore, the city has the first administrative burden to prove the notices and the appropriateness of the issuance.
Okay, well, let's find out. I know that it's stated that way. Let's find out from the appellants of this if they are objecting to anything.
Thank you.
Is there any objections to the notices you were given for the violations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of United Airlines, United Airlines does object to the notices of violation. In particular, we object to the basis for the city's basis for the notices. The city issued the notices to United Airlines under Section 181 of the city's codes. Section 181 pertains to the city's contractors. United Airlines is not a contractor of the city. United Airlines is a lessee. It leases space. So the city doesn't pay money to United Airlines as it would a contractor. The reverse is true. United pays the city to lease space. So Chapter 183 would be applicable. And under Chapter 183 of the city ordinances, there's no language that mirrors the language on which the city relies for Chapter 181.37. United Airlines would also mention that as a lessee, then Chapter 571.10 would apply. And under that chapter, the parties are responsible for their own equipment and anything that they may do. That's United Airlines' position. That said, it is committed to safety. It's made itself clear that it's committed to safety, but its position and its appeal is objecting because it's objecting to being issued a notice of violation for something for which it's not responsible.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, briefly in response.
Sure, absolutely.
I did not file it because it is so large, but I will do so post-hearing. There is a master lease agreement. A lease is a contract. The master lease agreement is between the City of Cleveland and United Airlines. The provisions in there will show this board that they have to comply with all laws and that they are responsible for compliance with all laws. I will make the argument that they are that master lease does have a section of compliance with all laws. Again, I will file that separately. The city states that the lease is the contract and it is subject to compliance with it. In addition, United as a prime, and we've been using the language, the prime is always responsible. The primary contractor is always responsible for the actions, omissions, etc. of its subcontractor, which is why the basis of the citation to United. So the city submits that based upon the clear language of the leases. And again, I will present this master lease to the board, but it does exist that United is on the city's property as a lessee and is required to follow all laws, and therefore it has the clear basis for issuing citation against it.
Okay, Ms. Johnson, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it seems that we're in agreement that that United is a lessee, and these violations pertain to equipment which is operated and maintained by a separate entity. So it remains United's position. Again, I mean, to be clear, it is committed to safety. It has complied with the laws, and that the violations are inappropriate to the extent that they extend to equipment that is operated and maintained by a separate entity. United's not a prime, it's not a contractor in this setting. So the whole chapter 181 would not apply to it. Instead, as I said, 183 is more applicable as a lessee.
And Mr. Chairman, they apply, the law applies. 181, 183, all of the codes. The lease is a contract. The city will present evidence that United, as we filed with our briefs, they own some of the equipment, as well as they direct and they post Menzies based upon the type of operation that goes on there. And we provided that lease between United and Menzies, that at Menzies or United's sole discretion, they decide the amount of space, et cetera. It is clearly proper for us to have them cited. They have responsibilities to it. So I don't know if you want to rule on that now, or if you want to hear everything and rule. We still have to hear if Menzies still objects, and then we can respond. And I don't know if you want to then rule on those objections before you hear the merits, or hear everything and then rule on the objections.
I think we're best off to hear everything. Mr. Roberts, you agree?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I agree with that.
Okay, so
you still have to hear if Menzies has any objections. Thank you, sir.
Yes, we will listen to find out if they have any. So for the attorneys for Menzies, would you care to comment on what your violation says?
Yes, this is Brandon Brown, counsel for Menzies, and our objections are laid out in our appeal. But under 383.27C, we're cited for having drums or containers exceeding the 60-gallon capacity outside, but under the definitions of this very section, all of our containers are tank vehicles, which are explicitly excluded of the inspection that was to have been the cause of the citations. And as of now, we are also still maintaining that we have no above ground outdoor storage of flammable liquids in barrels, drums, or containers exceeding the 60-gallon capacity. Also, we did have an inspection conducted on March 15th, which is before the inspection by the city was conducted. And we have corrected the deficiencies that we saw from that inspection. As you saw from our, we sent the email not too long ago, but we have been working diligently to address the city's concerns. We're not looking to, more than anything, we are also committed to safety, and we're committed to moving forward with this and finding a way to make sure that all of the issues that the city has had are corrected. And we've been making some leaps toward that. So that's where I'll end things off for now.
Okay, so it sounds like your objections are limited to a few items here, from what I'm hearing. I mean, one is that you're objecting to your tanker cars falling underneath the same rules as a container, and you're saying that they are different. And so you're objecting to them being considered the same. And we'll hear from either Ms. Aston or from Fire as to, the differences here and what they perceive it to be also. What was one of your other, you were objecting to an inspection being done after a certain time? Mr. Brown?
So yes, so there was an inspection allegedly done, and we're not saying that it wasn't. We just haven't received the report of that inspection. And the other point that we are objecting to is that we just don't have any of these storage containers over a 60-gallon capacity, which is what the citation states.
May I respond, Mr. Chairman, briefly?
Yes, you sure can.
I believe we've presented all of our statements in response specifically in our filings. However, for the record to state that 383.27C of the Cleveland Fire Code codified ordinances will apply, and we will give you that information. Specifically, there were mobile jet fuel tanks that were not in operable condition, being used simply for storage around Concourse D that were leaking, actively leaking. Fire will give that testimony in presentation. Those were up to 10,000 gallons. Menzies also has other equipment, fuel carts. Not everything is owned just by United. Menzies clearly saying it's only this. They are in possession and control over the operation. So we will give evidence and testimony to that. As it relates to no report of the inspection, there's a violation notice that was done because of the inspection and investigation that resulted from it. Fire does not just give out an inspection report, so that argument wholly fails, and we made that argument in our brief, but that is what they are here on, is the abatement order, which is the report from, we want to call it the report, it's the report from such inspection and investigation, also an abatement order, also a violation notice. It is fire's obligation to issue citations, and that is what was done here. We believe that they were doing above ground storage because they were those tanker trucks. Fire's going to testify that there were those not in active operation, being used as storage, leaking at the airport. They're going to testify to what they saw. Call it what you want, Rose, Manischewitz, whatever you want to call it. It was a outdoor storage. 315 inspection, correcting deficiencies. I don't even know how to say this. The whole reason we're here is because of those deficiencies. So to say that they had an inspection on March 15th and everything was returned to service by ARFF, you're going to hear ARFF is the Aircraft Rescue and Firefight by Department of Port Control. Basically, it's the Cleveland Airport Fire. The Department of Public Safety Division of Fire, Cleveland Fire, Lieutenant Talbot and Lieutenant Kelly are the authority with jurisdiction. So ARF is on the ground at Airport Fire. They are not the authority with jurisdiction. They will do inspections. It's actually incumbent upon Menzies and/or United to do those daily, monthly, quarterly, annual inspections. It's not for ARF to do and hold their hand, or Cleveland Fire to do and hold their hand. It is for public safety reasons. These photos, you can see the leaks on the ground right in front of me. These photos we're going to give testimony regarding it through Lieutenant Talbot and Lieutenant Kelly. But the incident that precipitated all this was on March 22nd, after the alleged argument that March 15th everything was A-OK and returned to service. The city is going to present testimony and evidence to show that that is wholly without merit. We're happy that the parties are working diligently. We are happy that they are committed to safety, as the city is. We will state that we want the actions on the ground to demonstrate that. And as recently as Monday, April 25th in the afternoon, after fire will testify to their couple hours of inspection, and that time we still had a leaky transmission. I think you have that report. It's in the record. We filed it with the 50-something photos of the investigation and the 27 photos of the reinspection. We wanted to show some good stuff in the reinspection. Fire's going to show you that, so and testify to that. But as it relates to these specific objections, we believe that the notices were issued correctly, legally, with proper authority, And we look forward to defending these notices vigorously based upon the clear public safety hazard that existed at the property at the time of the inspection investigation, and some remediation and abatement. A lot of abatement has occurred, but we're not in full compliance. The information is not, all of the information and documentation has not been provided. Fire is going to testify to all of these matters in a narrative form, subject to, happy to have cross-examination of our fire guys who are boots on the ground, and we look forward to defending this. Basically, I'm using this as my statement beginning to you, sir, to, so I can wrap it up and get right to testimony, but it was issued properly. We object to time. Nobody's asked for time. You gave them an opportunity. What are they objecting to? They're not asking for time. We ask, even if they do ask for time, that you deny it. In addition, council is jumping on to the objections filed with respect to council not licensed to practice in Ohio under Menzies. We filed our motion to strike. We're going to keep that motion on the table. We believe that it was improperly filed and therefore should be stricken. And we're very thankful they have somebody in Ohio for us to work with to try to resolve all these matters. That's the 425 report that's on there that we provided to you on the screen right now. But we are asking that you find it untimely. I know that you're going to so note me, sir, but I'm still making it for the record. And then at your pleasure, we are prepared for to jump right into the testimony with Lieutenant Kelly to give the background information and everything, and then the certification should it be necessary. But we believe the affidavit stands for itself for Lieutenant Talbin, who's the records keeper as well as the fire marshal. But we're prepared to wholly defend this vigorously, strongly. I will say that we are going to present evidence and testimony that United is not being, singled out. Fire is going, it's the largest. And this, I had a blunt conversation with both counsel yesterday. United, our theory of liabilities, we believe has a clear basis at law, but the city is meeting with everybody. Fire is working towards compliance with everybody, but we're limited resources and personnel. We can't go after everybody at once, and we are methodically doing this, and we started with the largest. So we are fully prepared to present all evidence, testimony, and ask at the conclusion, we're going to ask that you uphold these notices as properly issued, deny any appeal, and remand to the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so
I'd like the chance to respond if I could, just before we jump directly into the testimony.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so our biggest goal here was to really show that we've been making tremendous strides, as opposing counsel has stated, and that there's only that most of the things on the list are done, and that they're clear. And so even if, regardless of the citations that were issued, and those tankers are no longer there, the containers are clear, and we are, and she mentioned, time. One of the things that we've been discussing is more time to allow us to get into compliance. Right, there are some things that we found need to be replaced that have lead times, and just it is impossible for us to be able to get into compliance under the strict time limits that we're given, that being 14 days. And so that was something that I wanted to bring up before we jumped into all of the witness testimony.
Okay, you're asking.
Mr. Chairman, the city's going to present testimony through fire that they worked for weeks and got nowhere. And it's amazing what got done when they threw resources at it in a very short period of time, literally over a weekend. And it given the circumstances, situation, it should have never gotten to this point ever. And so that's why we are adamantly objecting to time.
Okay, well, all right. And I guess I'm curious as to Menzies. I assume you're taking care of the total airport for fueling, or are there other companies that are involved?
Mr. Chairman, I think since they object, it'd be appropriate for the city to present its evidence and testimony before you ask them to present their information. Regarding that, I
Okay.
think we can actually answer you some of those questions from
Okay.
fire's testimony. And in fairness to the appellants, they have objected, and so we have to present the information.
Sure. Okay, well then I guess it's time for you to proceed then on what you have. I don't know if we have to make any rulings yet.
Well, I've noted I think there'll be 3 rulings regarding the 2 objections in our motion. But prior to you, at the conclusion, I'll make sure to prod you.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. Patricia McGinty Aston, 0070689 on behalf of the City of Cleveland Department of Law for the Division of Fire. We are going to present the majority of our testimony on our side via Lieutenant Michael Kelly, who's going to give his testimony, and he is a CFSI Certified Fire Safety Inspector, and I'm going to have him do that as this board usually would do, in a narrative form, subject to cross-examination, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Lieutenant Kelly, if you could identify yourself.
Lieutenant Michael Kelly, Hazmat Specialist with the Cleveland Fire Department, CFSI 9532.
And your employer, who is your employer?
Cleveland Fire Department,
And how long have you been in this position?
33 years.
Retirement. OPERS, but not for you. I digress. So how long have you been in hazmat?
10,
And how long have you been with fire prevention?
the last 10 years.
How regularly do you do inspections in general?
On a daily basis.
And how regularly do you do inspections at Hopkins?
Usually when I get a report from ARF, which we do, of spills, we try to follow up on it, depending on the size of it.
And are you familiar with the fuel system and the jet fuel systems that exist at Hopkins?
Yes,
And do all the airlines use the same fuel systems?
they do not.
Can you explain to the board what those types of jet fueling systems exist at Hopkins in general?
You have the above ground tankers that go around and fuel certain airlines. Then you have the underground hydrant system, which is an underground piping system used by United for Concourse, I believe it's C. That is an underground system that is ran from an underground tank system on the property. Then you have private contractors that are on site that fuel the private aircraft that are on the property.
And during your investigation on this matter, did you learn who provides jet fuel services at Hopkins
Yes.
and who does so?
Menzies provides fuel to United and a couple of other airlines. Signature Airline is a private. Constant Aviation is another private.
So who does the most, the majority of the jet fuel systems?
Menzies handles the majority of fueling at the airport.
Okay. We filed our briefs with the board, but can you describe to the board why you were called to Hopkins in March of 2022?
Yes, March 22nd of this year, I responded on an emergency response with our department and airport fire to a jet fuel spill involving a 10,000-gallon tanker on Cargo Road. Upon arrival, airport fire was already on scene. They were trying to remediate the spill as it was going on. Apparently, one of the tankers had a transmission problem. As we were discussing with the driver and people on the scene, this tanker had a problem where the driver got out of the cab and the tanker rolled forward, creating 3 big gash marks in the side of the tank and releasing in excess of 800 gallons of the 10,000 gallons of jet fuel that was in this truck. We abated the run with airport fire, and airport also has an EHS system there that they can contain with pads and things of that nature. Further review with the driver and Menzies reps that were on scene. This truck apparently had this issue months prior to, should have been taken out of service, and this truck was still in service after all the paperwork was being put forward. And the driver even stated that the week prior to this, he reported it again that there was a transmission issue with this tanker. Being that it's Jet A and he's hauling around 10,000 gallons, this truck should have been taken out of service prior to this accident. This accident is the initiation of the investigation of all their equipment.
And Mr. Chairman, just for reference, the city in its certification under 3103-20.E3 automatic stay by Lieutenant Talbin, those photographs are attached at Exhibit 2 that we filed with this board on April 21st and served upon the parties via email to their prior, either directly to them or their out-of-state counsel. And that report is also attached. And so Lieutenant Kelly, you were actually on site for that incident, correct?
Correct.
Have you, in your investigation, did you receive any reports from ARF?
Yes, I did. ARF submitted the report for that day and subsequent reports from weeks prior to and months prior to.
So is it fair to say you received reports for 2021 as well as up through March of 2022?
Yes.
And what did those reports indicate to you in general?
Mechanical problems, driver error, issues of those natures.
Did it indicate any training issues?
It indicated to me that there's a systemic breakdown within Menzies at the airport, starting with the supervisors leading down to the drivers, their responsibilities, their accountabilities involving training and equipment maintenance.
So even if you're being told there's being training, the actions on the ground will belie that training?
As recently as the other day, yes, it does, because the driver decided and was told by a supervisor that he had a transmission leak. He should drive it back to the garage when that vehicle should have just stayed in place where it was parked to mitigate the situation there. Instead, it turned into a 1,500-foot long spill that had to be mitigated, which tells me that there's still a systemic breakdown of accountability to the drivers, and you have to hold the supervisors accountable, as we do here, because there's still a systemic breakdown to that system this week.
Are you talking about the Monday, April 25th, 2022 report?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have presented that to this board. I'm not going to necessarily identify the exhibits unless you require me to, but you have received it and all parties have received it. Lieutenant Kelly, can you generally explain to the board how you and or fire will access the property at Hopkins?
We get our we go through security clearance through airport fire.
Through ARF?
Yes.
But do you always have to go through ARF?
No, there are times outside the secure perimeter when we can go and inspect companies and businesses.
At all times in relation to this jet fuel incident and investigation thereafter, were you accompanied by ARF?
Yes, every time we stepped on the property.
And
we also, and after the subsequent investigation and inspections, I required a rep from Menzies.
Both the March 22nd incidents you've already testified to and the April 25th incident that you've testified to, do you have any indication that it was specific to Menzies?
Yes.
Do you have any indication that it was specific to United, those two incidences?
That instance, it would be Menzies.
Not United, correct?
Their company, not United.
Okay. But United is the primary recipient of Menzies fuel services at Hopkins, correct? That's
correct.
And United, who receives the majority of the fuel services of Menzies at Hopkins?
As I've been informed, it's United.
And how did you learn that information?
Through airport fire and Menzies reps.
And so that was a direct discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've provided photographs to the board. I'm going to stick with the first group of photographs that I think were labeled for your investigation that shows the leaks and spills. Maurice, if you can go to, I think Did you take the photographs for the investigation?
These photos have been taken by one of the ARP representatives from Airport Fire.
And do they accurately reflect the conditions at the
Yes,
time?
they do. Yes, they do.
And
Those
did you,
those were active leaks on parked tankers.
and were these separate from the March 22nd fuel
Yes,
jet
they
spill?
were. Yes, they were.
And did you, were you on the Hopkins property during the last 6 weeks, separate from March 22nd?
Yes.
And did you see conditions similar to the photographs that have been provided to the board?
Conditions have improved drastically. Over the past weekend, they have finally degreased all of their vehicles.
I'm going to stop you because I wanted to talk. I'm going to have you describe the problems to the board. I absolutely want you to testify to the conditions of abatement, but I want to describe the problems first and then have you go ahead and describe the specific conditions. So if you can testify to the board who owns what, and what problems existed, and then go into the abatement and the importance of the abatement.
So the initial inspection was on the 23rd of March. I went around with an ARP representative and we looked at their tankers and the fueling carts that are used on the underground hydrant system. Almost every one of the tankers was grease laden, or it had a type of fuel that had leaked out for a certain period of time. You should be able to inspect the truck or a tanker to see if there are any active leaks. And that was very hard to do. If that truck was standing still, it was obvious there was a puddle underneath it. Some of these vehicles, as you can see in these photos, the tank contains 10,000 gallons of Jet A fuel. These vehicles have been ran into stationary objects and possibly another truck. I don't know, but the condition of these vehicles are like they've been in a type of a demolition derby with each other. It's just, you wouldn't expect that out of a Jet A tanker on an airport property. As you can see in the photos, there are several things. On the one truck, the one filter that filters the fuel that goes into the jets, there is a cross member that is the only protection to that filter, and that has actually been dented. It looks like they hit a bollard with that and creased it all the way into the filter itself. That's the only protective measure for that filter. This is what makes me believe there's still a systemic breakdown with accountability to their drivers. As you run into something, I don't know what they're doing in the way of driver training. You can see in some of these photos, some of these vehicles have hit objects, stationary objects. I don't know, but it's just the condition of some of the vehicles was deplorable in the beginning to where it looked like they weren't even roadworthy. On the day of the accident, on March 22nd, I looked in the cab and witnessed with airport operations that it actually had a transmission warning light on. So that vehicle was being operated in a way that it should have been off the road immediately, but they still operated it. So the carts themselves, I've been told, are owned by United, and Menzies has Menzies uses the carts and Menzies maintains the carts. The 23rd I was there, I went around, there was an actual cart that was leaking that they threw Drysorb under United employees did prior to us arriving there. So the carts have been an issue also. The previous carts had been an issue about leaks and problems with the carts. And it has been stated to me several times that the carts are owned by United. Menzies uses and maintains the carts.
Can you describe the conditions that were surrounding Concourse D, as in dog?
Concourse D is where they park their tank vehicles, and Concourse D.
Just the vehicles?
That's where they park the tank vehicles and carts, all in the same area on the west side of Concourse D. When we did the initial inspections, there were obvious signs of fuel leaks below the tankers, and some of the carts you could tell had acted leaks because there were grease-laden fittings on there that were very appropriate for a leak on a cart. And like I said, always sends their reports to us about problems with fueling at the airport.
So the conditions at Concourse D when you first saw them was the carts and the fuel, mobile jet fuel tanks on the trucks or connected to the trucks, whatever was there, were they actively being used?
There were several older units that were against a south wall that I was told they were using those for parts to maintain the current fleet of carts that they had. And there are several tankers that were out of service, 2 of them that were out of service, that were housed and parked with the other vehicles that were parked there.
Were they leaking?
Those 2 were not. They did not have fuel in them.
Did you ever see any of the tankers leaking that were parked out of service there?
Yes, there were visible leaks that were in the pictures that you were shown.
So was it appropriately parked and out of service around by Concourse D, in your opinion?
In my opinion, no, because I don't know of any secondary containment. If that tanker were to have a leak that would be undetectable or unmonitored at the time for an extended period of time. I don't know if anything leads straight to the river from that concourse. I don't know of any oil water separators over there. I don't know how they would have secondary containment. I have asked why they are parking there, and that's another subject matter.
So even if they were allowed to be there, they were actively leaking there.
Correct.
And to the violation of the city's codes?
Correct.
And the state codes?
Correct.
Can you talk about the standards? But before I do that, you gave some generalizations. Can you encapsulate some of the specific violations that you observed while you were doing this inspection investigation to the board? About the tanks, the carts, the trucks, and even hoses, equipment, etc. Just to encapsulate it to the board.
The first and foremost is active leaking, seeps, drips, sweeps, things of that nature. Almost every piece of equipment had that in one form or another. The carts, you could tell, had active leaks. Possibly when they were being used, but you could tell just by the dirt and grease that were on fittings. There were hoses that had very large abrasions to them, like they had been dragged across the ground, which puts in question why that hose would still be in service.
What about the maintenance of the equipment?
Through my point of view, there was a lack of maintenance on the equipment.
Can you tell us what standards are used on for aircraft fueling service equipment?
Aircraft fueling falls under the standard NFPA 407, standard for aircraft fueling servicing. NFPA 30 and NFPA 385.
And NFPA 30 is in relation to flammable combustible liquids?
Yes.
And NFPA 385 are standards for tank vehicles and flammable and combustible liquids?
Correct.
And are those incorporated into NFPA 407?
Yes, ma'am.
And is all of that incorporated into the Ohio Fire Code?
Yes.
And is all of that incorporated into the city's fire code because they have to follow all laws?
Yes.
Is that why you cited 383 points? Hang on. 27C?
Yes.
Is that why you cited 383.28A?
Yes.
Does NFPA 407 under Chapter 4 require maintenance?
Yes.
Does that apply to the spill procedures?
Yes.
And does that apply to the carts, equipment, hoses, connections, trucks, tankers?
Yes.
And containers? And does NFPA 407 Chapter 6 apply to tank vehicles?
Yes.
Does that apply? Does that have a maintenance requirement?
Yes, it does.
When you were doing your inspection and investigation in this matter, were these equipments meeting those standards?
They were not at that time.
Can you Is there a wash requirement for maintenance?
Yes, there is.
Can you describe to the board what is that wash and requirement and the importance of that and whether or not it was being met?
The vehicles are be kept free from any type of combustible, flammable material, and they are to be kept clean and clear to be able to inspect for any type of leak, weeps, seeps, or drips.
And why is that important?
That is the only way we can confirm that this vehicle is roadworthy.
At the time you were doing this inspection and investigation, were the equipment, all the equipment, carts, regardless of owned by United, Menzies, used by Menzies, tanks, containers, trucks, were they meeting this wash requirement?
They were not at that initial inspection.
Isn't it just like a dirty car though? Does it really matter?
It's very similar to a very dirty engine on a car with grease and road grime. You can't really indicate anything that's going on with the piping or the fittings.
And does NFPA 407 require that wash?
Yes, it does.
Now I want to shift you to the abatements, which we are more than happy to discuss with the board, Mr. Chairman, because that's what we're here for, is compliance and abatement. Has there been steps towards abatements in this matter?
There have been great leaps toward the abatements with Menzies. The first thing I would like to say is they have replaced all of their fueling cards for the underground storage hydrant system.
Who has, Menzies?
Yes, all of their old
United?
cards, Menzies and United. United has brought in new carts that have replaced all the older carts. Those have been certified and placed into service this past week.
And what else has been done?
All of the trucks now have been pressure washed. They're free of all grease, all road grime. As of the moment, there are no leaks on any of the tanker trucks, as I know of this morning.
That's good to know. That's good to hear.
Every one of them has gone through a pressure wash, and they have cleaned each vehicle at the best that they can. And now you can inspect a truck. If there is an active leak, you can find the origin of it immediately.
So, in your investigation for this matter, did you have an opportunity to talk to Menzies as to why it got to the way it did?
Their opinion, certain opinions from Menzies, was that the airport was treated as they were the catch-all for equipment that wasn't needed or used anywhere else.
We were the dumping ground?
That would be the term.
In your investigation, where did this equipment come from?
All over the United States.
And in your investigation, were they finger pointing for blame?
It was going back and forth between finger pointing at their corporate, finger pointing at United.
So everybody was trying to blame somebody else during your investigation?
Yes, yes.
Did you meet with Menzies and United to try to resolve this prior to issuing the citations?
Yes, we did.
Can you describe to the board what that entailed?
The meeting involved you yourself, Attorney Tomasello, several individuals from United, several from Menzies, that we basically set out, told them of the issues. We were told that the issues would be addressed at that time. And we were left with a feeling is that they would start immediately to address the issues.
Was that on April 7th?
Yes, it was.
Did you tell them at that time you wanted the entities to provide you with a written plan to address everything immediately?
Yes, I did. I asked for an action plan at that time.
Did you tell them you wanted an action plan with specific date and times that to address the maintenance, the fleet worthiness, the leaks, seeps, drips, in a specific written plan?
Yes.
Did you ask them for specific records to provide inspection results and identification in that plan?
Yes.
Have you received that?
The only thing I've received so far was an initial action plan that I rejected because it did not address all the problems in the violation letter. That's the only thing I've received. This morning, I did receive a subsequent action plan, but the only thing it had was the wordage from our violations. It didn't have anything else in it.
So you haven't reviewed anything that gives specific procedures as to,
No, I have not.
okay. What are you looking for from United and Menzies?
I'm looking for from Menzies is their current SPCC plan. I'm also looking for any SOPs, which are standard operating procedures, which would be in regards to any spills, any mechanical leaks, how they document those on a daily basis, what documents do they have to track these vehicles and carts when there are issues with them.
So would those be like a step-by-step statement of what you're going to do in these instances?
Yes.
Would it also encompass an address timeframes of what's going to be done when and on a monthly, daily, quarterly, annual basis as the code requires?
Yes, it would address how and when it would be done.
And were those requests made in your abatement orders and requests for corrective action?
Yes, they were.
So as we sit here today, you've not received everything to be in full compliance with the orders or with the code, correct?
That's correct.
We've made great strides. We're much better than where we were at the beginning of March, though, correct?
I will give them credit. They have taken leaps and bounds, okay, mechanically, and by United replacing all the carts, that has taken a massive issue away from that, the underground hydrant system, and Menzies has done a great job of trying to remediate the issues with their tankers.
And are you looking from United what they're going to do to ensure that their fuel service provider follows the law?
I have received nothing.
But is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
So if they provide that to you, if both parties provide that information to you, would you find that they have been in compliance with the orders?
Yes.
Should it have even gotten to this part? Isn't it the function of the codes that the entities are supposed to be complying with these laws?
They are, and I would expect the entities to know what codes and laws they are operating under and which state and city they're in.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing further at this time unless the parties need me to identify and have Lieutenant Talbin specify as to his affidavit. As the fire marshal, it's his obligation to do so, and we would stand by that because it was, I'll just do the statement. Lieutenant Kelly and to Lieutenant Kelly and Lieutenant Talbin, why did you certify this as an imminent peril to the board? I'll just get the testimony in.
Because it was a hazard that was there and needed to be corrected.
But was it just a general hazard? Could it have just waited and gone through normal process?
No, it was a high hazard with the material that was involved and absolutely the location it was at.
Yes, this involves the general public being on aircraft. They're fueling, aircraft for United and other entities. You have to have the public safety first and foremost in mind. And when you're spilling fuel and you have vehicles that aren't being maintained, that is a massive public safety issue to me personally.
And me as
well.
well.
Is it, but not personally, is it under the code and under the law?
Yes, it is.
Really doesn't matter what you personally think.
Yes, it is.
So Mr. Chairman, the city presents that as its basis for the issuances of the notice based upon all of our prior arguments. I would, defer to the board and council on its right to cross-examine Lieutenant Talbot and Lieutenant Kelly. Thank you, sir.
Yes, I have just maybe one or two questions, Lieutenant, but have those larger mobile that weren't mobile at the time being used for storage of fuel in excess of the gallons that you're allowed to have stationary. I forget the number, it was 600 or somewhere. But anyways, are any of them being used for just standing storage anymore?
This is what I've been told by numerous airport fuel providers. They will load a tanker, a 10,000 gallon tanker with 9,500 gallons of fuel. It will be parked over on Concourse D until they need it for the next shift, which could be 4 to 6 hours. They preload a tanker and it sits there.
Okay, where does the fuel come from?
It comes from the BP Air, which is an underground tank system at the northeast corner of the property.
Okay, so it's all underground when it comes in.
Correct.
And then they fuel the tanker and they're fueling it ahead of time so that they have it ready, I guess?
Yes, and then it's storage as it sits there for the 4 to 6 hours or however longer it is.
How do you find that practice in itself?
It could be anywhere between 1 to 3 tankers. And in the Ohio Fire Code, it's strictly prohibited to use a tank car, tank vehicle as a fixed storage tank.
So that storage should be underground until it's used? Is that
Correct.
You're
Correct.
thinking? Okay, so their procedure in how that's going, is that the same? In other words, are they still doing that?
Still filling trucks.
I do believe they are. I haven't been told anything different.
All right, and does something address that? You know, with them sitting there? In other words, in your thinking, that fuel should be coming from underground within whatever amount of time they need to get from Concourse D to where they have to fuel.
Correct. It would be from the start of a shift. You would know that you're going to be fueling 3 aircraft. So you load the tanker with the fuel needed for that. And then after the fueling of those 3 aircraft, you go back again and you fuel the tanker again for whatever flights you're going to be needed. It shouldn't be used as a fixed storage tank.
For any amount of time, is that what you're saying? So there's sort of a violation there that could be ongoing right now.
Yes.
Okay, and you need to be aware of that.
Yes.
Okay, so there should be some, like you said, procedures in place for how that's done. And if it's just not possible to fuel the planes, then then that needs to be noted.
Correct. I don't know if it would involve manpower on their part or having more tankers on the ground there. Logistically, I do not know.
Okay. Okay, so but the other storage tankers you were talking about on vehicle trucks that weren't in service, are they still storing fuel in them?
No, they are not.
Okay, that's been taken
No, they're
care of.
not.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna assume that Menzies does other airports also.
They're a national, if not worldwide.
Okay, gotcha. And I just hope that Cleveland isn't being a dumping ground for used junk that ends up here. We seem to get that sometimes, and it just where other places are getting all the new equipment, and then they take the other stuff and bring it here.
I agree with you.
Yeah, we'll let them address that and see what their response is. So you're done for now, Patty?
Yes, sir. And subject to just having him under redirect, but
Okay.
not going to really call it that. Just I'm going to be very limited. That was the crux of everything we needed to have testified to defend our orders. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any of the other board members want to question lieutenants?
I'm away from
Okay, I'm not
Mr. Brown
hearing.
and Mr. Bowen.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll ask for a response. I'm not sure. It probably should go to Menzies at the moment, I suppose.
Yes, Chairman, we'd like the opportunity to ask some questions to the lieutenant as well.
You can go ahead and proceed the same way.
Okay. All right. Just a few. You mentioned that excuse me, that Menzies has been making some strides, particularly over the last week or so. What, in your opinion, appears to need to be left to be done?
On the tankers, we'll start with the tankers themselves. They have finally degreased the tankers. Mechanically, they are addressing issues. There was one tanker that was in the garage. They're addressing the issue with that transmission. A lot of it is superficial now. If you look in the pictures, you can see where it looked like fenders have come in contact with stationary objects. What we're looking for, they have 2 tankers that we consider the queens of their fleet. Those tankers have no dents or dings in them at the moment, and that's the basis we would like the other tankers to come up to. So it involves replacing fenders, replacing the crash guard in front of the filter. When I was there the other day for the inspection, the Menzies reps knew exactly what we were talking about, and they said they've already, and I have to appreciate them doing it, they're already got steps to replace certain items so that if we were to walk up to that truck next week, we would not see any of that. It would just, it would be an acceptable tanker for our inspection purposes. The carts themselves, we are very happy with. They've got all the old carts out of service. All the new carts, the 8 carts that they have been certified, and they are all put in service over the past weekend.
Okay, so it sounds like of the few things that seem to remain, would it be a good way to characterize it as, or characterize your feeling as though Menzies is taking the appropriate steps to remedy that?
We are taking the appropriate steps. It has taken quite a while, and what I'm looking for is documentation now for accountability and responsibility.
Okay.
And that's one of the most important steps, and communication.
Okay. You stated earlier that there's a you were talking about the tankers that are pre-fueled, for lack of a better phrase. Is it your understanding that that is still occurring now?
That I cannot tell you. I do not know.
Okay. And
I would assume it is so.
Okay, but you can't say you haven't seen it, or you haven't been told directly that that's the case, right?
Correct.
I would hope that would be in your report also that you give over to fire, as far as length of time that those tankers are sitting there when they're fueled. That's got to be addressed.
Yeah, understood.
So if I could, sir, one of the big things we are looking for, I was told that Menzies is using the city of Cleveland snow equipment removal barn right now for their wash bay. We have to find a definitive answer to that, because I was told the contract was only for a year, when these trucks will more than likely have to be washed on a quarterly or possibly a monthly basis just to keep them clean.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I don't necessarily want to turn this into the meeting that clearly needs to be had. And no, but I appreciate that comment. But I think how have the communications been between your department and Menzies over the past couple of weeks with regard to these issues?
I had a couple of emails. That is it, from Menzies. And I told them it had to be an open communication line. If there was anything you needed to discuss, it had to come through us first. And I think there was miscommunication that they were sending emails other places. The action plan didn't get to me till last week. I reviewed it and then denied it, and received another action plan this morning that did not have, it had our violation wordage in it, but it did not tell me what Menzies would do to abate that.
Okay. So would you be open to, in the immediate future, having a meeting with Menzies to discuss those remaining issues?
Yes.
And I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right. I don't think I have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, anyone else have any on the board, have any questions for Menzies?
I do not.
Okay, okay. Then I guess we'll hear from, see, we got Ms. Johnson from United.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple quick questions for Lieutenant Kelly. Good morning, Lieutenant Kelly. Just so I'm clear, you would agree that any equipment that you believed was owned by United and used and maintained by Menzies, for which you had concerns, has been replaced, correct?
Yes, yes, correct.
So there's no equipment that you believe that is owned by United that was used and maintained by Menzies that has not been abated today.
As of today, correct.
You're looking for, as I understand it, a plan and some standard operating procedures from Menzies, right?
Correct.
If you receive an acceptable plan and are able to meet with Menzies and come to an agreement on an acceptable plan, would you consider all of the notices of violations in compliance?
After reviewing with the city attorneys, I would come to that conclusion then.
That's all the questions that I have. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Austin, do you have anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything else as it relates to the merits, subject to, just to have Lieutenant Kelly explain to the board why this documentation, SOP, and plan is not a quote mere paperwork, the importance of that, just so everybody's aware that this is not just it's mere paperwork. So Lieutenant Kelly, if you could explain to the board the importance of that.
The documentation will start in the morning with the driver and a supervisor. They basically go over the truck and they look at this truck for a roadworthy, acceptable vehicle. They will mark on that and document on that morning document exactly what might be wrong with the truck, or if the truck passed their inspection for the morning and that truck would be capable of fueling any type of a plane. We're looking for documents that the driver, if he has an incident on the tarmac where he has the transmission leak, he will stop right there. He will call the appropriate individuals, but he will then, right then and there, document the truck he's in, document the problem he has, and then that'll be a written document right then of the issue. That's what we're looking for, accountability and responsibility. These vehicles, you've got 10,000 gallons of jet fuel that is running around the airport tarmac. I would hope that they would take that more responsible and be accountable, have the supervisors make the drivers more accountable to it. Instead of the numerous spills that we've had out at that airport, you really should not have, in lieu of a mechanical failure, you should not have a driver having an issue if he has been trained, quote unquote. That you need a paper trail that says that yes, this driver has been trained, he will be accountable to what he does, just as you would have a CDL driver's license over the road. We need something to hold them accountable for what they're doing with the fuel that they're carrying around.
And these documentation of these reports assists in lessening the hazards, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Subject to that, Mr. Chairman, just so that the parties were aware of why fire wants that information and the importance of it for them for review.
Well, I was going to ask a question.
And the code requires, but go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
What is in place now? I mean, previous, was there nothing in place?
Sir, what they have what's called a no-go inspection form that I have yet to see, which I don't understand. We're going to require standard operating procedures, which we have on the fire department, and it tries to address, but it won't always address everything, but it will give you a basis. If something goes wrong, you need to start here and then go down the list from there. It gives them, a driver, something to work off of, instead of just like the other day, the driver was told to go back to the garage with a leaking transmission. It would tell him to stop there, wait for a supervisor, wait for airport fire to mitigate the situation right where you're at. it would give him guidelines.
Okay, and they are in control with somebody there at Menzies, right? From the driver itself?
Yes.
Well, today everybody's got cell phones too, but I mean, I would think they would have communication to be able to do that. Okay.
Subject to that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to remind you of the 3 points I stated earlier. We ask that you rule on the city's motion to strike that we argued, and that you need to rule on both United and Menzies objections in their appeal. Subject to that, the city is, as we stated at the very beginning, we are asking that you uphold the notices as properly issued, deny the appeals, remand to the Department of Public Safety Division of Fire. Other than that, that's all we have. Thank you.
Okay. Is any comments by the board members? So
I don't have any, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Maskey? Mr. Bradley, anything?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, so on this, going back to our attorney on this motion to strike, I guess that's one of the first things that we're looking for here. What actually are we doing as a, that particular motion?
Well, Mr. Chair, this is Kevin Roberts. The motion specifically identifies procedural issue with respect to who filed the notice of appeal to this board. But in essence, you have already allowed for the argument to be made by Menzies Aviation, who's the subject of the motion to strike. And we have received confirmation from Mr. Brandon Brown, local counsel for the appellant, Menzies Aviation. It is for the board to decide if the motion to strike the appeal itself for the technical error is warranted, but it's your discretion to determine, based on what you've heard this morning, if you're going to allow for what has been presented.
All right, well, we're definitely going to allow for what has been presented. So we are not going to move to strike. In my opinion, we can listen to the other board members because we've already heard, we've allowed them to go forward. If we weren't going to do that, we should have voted to strike, I suppose, before Menzies even went into what they were going to say. So I believe that we would deny that motion. Any of the other board members have anything on it?
I would agree.
Okay. So motion to deny that particular order to strike. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Okay, motion by Mr. Dank, second by Mr. Maskey.
Mr. Maskey,
Yes.
Mr. Dink,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, Mr. Gallagher.
Yes. Okay, so that takes care of that motion. Now we're, Ms. Aston, if you'd remind me again on the second one.
Thank you, sir. Both United and Menzies appeal is based upon objections. So in rolling into your motion to make a ruling on these appeals, you are ruling on their objections to the violation notice abatement order as issued, and we argued those arguments at the beginning. So just to remind you that that is part of the board's motion on their rulings with this appeal. They've both objected and stated their reasons in their written appeal statements. They've objected to the issuances of the notices for their stated reasons, both in their arguments to this board today, as well as in their written appeal statements. So I the city believes it would be appropriate for you upon ruling on it to make address those objections at some point, because, and we ask that you find that we, again, properly issued those notices, uphold them, deny and remand. So that's just to acknowledge that this was an objection to the notices only. Nobody asked for time. It was not a request for time on compliance, sir.
Well, okay, so the easy one, of course, is with Menzies. We can go ahead and find that that was properly issued, and let's see.
Well, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt, but I was under the impression that we would get the opportunity to have Mr. Keith testify on behalf of Menzies. I mean, particularly with regard to compliance and our ability and abatement of the issues.
Well, I think they still exist, some of them. And so I think they want an action report on this. And so I think that it was properly issued to the violations that were there. And you did do a good job in getting rid of a lot of stuff, but I think some of it still exists. And also that report to have that done. So I think that, I'm not sure exactly what the testimony would say, but if you would like, we will hear him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city believes he has the right to present his defense. So we would state that both United and Menzies does have the absolute right to present evidence and testimony on their own behalf. And I will absolutely cross-examine their witnesses.
Okay, go ahead and go forward.
Thank you. Mr. Keith, are you there?
I am.
Thank you for being on the call today. I just have a few questions. We've already heard Lieutenant Kelly talk about some of the strides that Menzies has made as far as the abatement of these issues. But can you talk a little bit about the standard operating procedures as they exist today regarding the no-go items and drivers?
Sure. So no-go items it's really just shorthand for existing SOPs, right? So it just is a condensed way for us to communicate to the drivers, easy for them to understand. It's a short list of items that if they exist in the operation of that vehicle has to be removed from service until it's repaired. And for instance, leaks of any type are a no-go item. So if it has a jet fuel leak from a hose or a pump, or the tank or a valve, that unit would have to come out of service. Similarly, if it had a fluid leak, transmission fluid, brake fluid, trans fluid, motor oil, that unit would be required to be removed from service. And if it has an air leak, because we use air to operate a bunch of the safety systems on our tanker trucks, that would also require removal from service. So we have a short list of no-go items that is just a reminder to the guys that if any of these conditions exist on the vehicles during the operation, they have to be removed from service.
Okay.
Thank you.
So these things, the no-go items do exist. Do you care to respond, Lieutenant?
I will do so, Mr. Chairman, Patty, on behalf of the city, unless Mr. Brandon Brown has anything further.
Yeah, I do have a couple more questions.
If you could just let him provide all of his testimony, and I will ask.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, go forward.
So, Mr. Keith, of the remaining issues that that Menzies is still trying to remediate, can you describe what's left to be done from the issues that the city has stated?
Yeah, so like most, including some of the folks on the call, we are challenged with limited resources and personnel. Our suppliers have similar challenges as well. And so what we've done is, which makes sense, is to prioritize based on risk and then feasibility, because we had 14 days. And so that's what we did. So the lion's share of the work that got done, I'm going to say we're probably 70% of the way there. Were the things that were a high priority and feasible, right? So things that we could do quickly and that made a material difference. The remaining 30% gets increasingly harder to complete because of the time demand, having to remove assets from service for extended periods of time, which means they're not available to support the operation. And then when we do a thorough mechanical inspection, what we find will dictate the time demand for the repairs. So for instance, we've kind of chunked these into a couple of buckets. One is kind of appearance, right? So this is what we talked about with fenders, tanks needing to be buffed, brackets needing to be replaced. Those items, I would say that I need probably 60 days to get all of that done. For the heavy mechanical inspections, and we're talking that the chassis inspection is frame, air system, brake system, kingpins, fifth wheel plates, tank welds, the man lifts. I mean, it's a significant amount of work. And then what we find in terms of deficiencies there would dictate, for instance, if I have to do work on a lift, I have to have a third party because it has to be certified. If I have to do welding on a tank, that's going to be a third party. So that's going to take a lot of time as well. These units will be down probably 2 weeks at a time. And realistically, I'm looking at probably 150 days to get through all of their 9 tanker trucks that I need to get through. So while I appreciate that there was an indication that we hadn't requested the time, I need time. That is actually the thing that I do need. I mean, I appreciate and agree with the concern over the leaky equipment. I appreciate and agree with the mechanical condition concern. The appearance of the equipment is not to Menzies standards and expectations. I would not argue anything in regards to housekeeping. Really, my only issue and challenge that I have is the timeline. And so our interest in this meeting today was essentially to see if we can sit down, work on a plan, agree timelines, toll gates, and follow up to make sure that we can get all this stuff done, in a reasonable fashion.
Okay, for me, Mr. Keith, and I wouldn't ask you to agree to this, but I don't think these things should have got to where they are. It just seems like a lot of this stuff should have been just general maintenance and things that should have been going on, at an airport and doing what you're doing. And so that's part of what, and I understand you need time to correct what maybe you didn't know what was going on before. I'm not sure, but it shouldn't have got to this point from what I'm looking at here. So anyways, go ahead. I'll let you continue.
Yeah. So just so we're clear, Mr. Keith, how long have you been involved with the Cleveland location of Menzies specifically?
In regards to this issue,
yes.
Yeah, I received a phone call when a meeting was convened at the airport and was ongoing. And my understanding is that the airport had counsel there, and there was an expectation that we had counsel there. We had no idea. In fact, I don't know that we were invited to the meeting. I think United extended the invitation to us, but that was the first invitation that I had.
And this was on what date?
I actually don't know the date. I have to go back and look. But I would think that council, airport council was there and Lieutenant Kelly was there. I want to say it's was it 20? Oh, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Would you say it was of more or less than a month ago?
Oh, I believe it was this month.
Okay. And just one last thing. There were some mentions before about the storage of materials, particularly at the Cleveland site, and there was even some allusions to that Cleveland may have been used as a dumping site for Menzies. To your knowledge, is Cleveland in any way used in that manner as a dumping site for unused or unwanted material?
So no. So just in terms of storage, right? I think maybe one way to look at that conversation is to make a distinction between the in-service and the out-of-service equipment. Okay, and out-of-service equipment that contains fuel, right? I would agree. You could make a case as storage. So carts that were out of service on Concourse D and tankers that were out of service on Concourse D, they were left with residual fuel in those systems. And so what happens when you have fuel in a closed system, and fuel expands and contracts with temperature. So when it gets hot, it expands, it creates pressure. Because of the pressure, that fuel will seek the path of least resistance. And of course, it can have seeps, weeps, leaks, and drips. And so that condition could have existed and did exist. So all of those carts on D that were surplus and the tankers on D that were out of service, they've all been evacuated. They are drained. They're empty. So that issue's been resolved. The carts were owned by United. We have agreement with United to get rid of those carts, to move them from the facility. So we're currently in the process of dismantling those and looking for a vendor to remove them from the site, because as you heard earlier, they were replaced with newer carts from United.
And speaking of newer parts, just to piggyback that off of that, even on newer equipment and newer tankers, given the way that fuel expands and contracts, even those newer systems can have leaks even when they're new, correct?
That's correct. So the replacement carts that we brought in, they came in from San Francisco. They were actually flow tested in San Francisco by a mechanic that I actually hired personally, and he does a great job. And then we flowed them again, and when we put them into service in Cleveland, and they were leak free at the time that we put them in service in conjunction with the fire department. Then it got cold, right? And everything contracted, which would include some of the fittings on those newer carts. And so that morning of following the drop in the temperature, we did have some leaks on some of the newer carts, and we had to go in and snug up some fittings. But that's not an unusual circumstance.
So it's not necessarily about, is it necessarily about containing all leaks from ever happening, or about the maintenance and ensuring that there are procedures in place for when those leaks occur?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be feasible to prevent every leak. There's not a perfect system. The critical piece is to be doing meaningful daily inspections, operator pre-use inspections, and being aware of the condition of the equipment during the course of its operation, so that should a leak develop and during its use, it's promptly removed from service and repaired.
And I know that you discussed earlier that we have some of those standard operating procedures in place, but going forward, would you or another representative from Menzies be willing to sit down and have discussions with the fire department to ensure that our standard operating procedures align with what will satisfy the fire department?
Absolutely. So just a little background. Menzies is a mature business. It was formed in 1833. It's the third largest ground handler in the world. And as such, we have pretty robust safety management system, safety enabling program. This Cleveland operation in its current state is not indicative of the standard of care that we expect as a company. We do almost everything that's been asked for in regards to abatement as it may pertain to standard operating procedures, training, or documentation. We have existing. It really amounts to a failure of this local operation to adhere to all of our normal SOPs and business practices. I will tell you that because in terms of priority, abating this issue and getting back on track with the city of Cleveland is the priority. I haven't spent a lot of time going backwards historically to figure out how this transpired, but we will. And then we'll address it at that time.
I thank you, Mr. Keith. I don't think I have anything else right now. Reserve the right for, I guess, for lack of a better term, a redirect if necessary, but I don't have anything else right now.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. I do have a little bit more than I originally intended because of the testimony. Mr. Keith, I believe you were referring to the April 7th meeting at United's conference rooms. You were present, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you did not have counsel, and we told you basically don't say anything because you didn't have counsel, correct? You tried to get somebody on the phone and we said, just listen, right?
Yeah, to my knowledge, we actually didn't receive an invitation. The invitation was forwarded us by United.
The city fire was told, come and we're going to have lawyers. So when they have lawyers, we bring our lawyers. And the city's position is always boots on the ground, engage with our boots on the ground because problems get solved quickly that way. I'm going to refer you've talked about SOPs, your no-goes, you have standard operating procedures already in place. That was your testimony, is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you have those written somewhere?
We do.
Where are they?
The majority of our programs and policies are available online in their current revision, right? So they're not necessarily formatted for print because we keep it all live in the system. However, we can extract those documents if a printed copy is needed, and they'll extract with a footer that they're no longer controlled documents.
And how long have you had these written standard operating procedures in place?
Well, it would depend on which SOP you'd be referring to, but they're long-standing practices. Yeah.
How long have you had SOPs in place for the safety and standards of aircraft fuel servicing?
Menzies acquired ASIG as ASIG is the fueling arm of the business, and ASIG has been fueling airplanes for over 80 years.
And how long have you had SOP, standard operating procedures, written for maintenance of equipment?
Yeah, so I've been with the business now for over 17 years, and they've been in existence since I joined the business.
Have you've been physically at Menzies operation in Cleveland since at least the beginning of April, correct?
I have.
Where are you located physically out of your office or your job? You're not stationed in Cleveland, correct?
I am not. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, you're not the Florida guy who came in, right?
I am not.
You're not the Florida guy. Okay. I heard about the Florida guy, and I heard a lot of good things about the Florida guy, so I would like to pass that along to you. So the Florida guy is pretty good. Everybody talks very well about the Florida guy.
The Florida guy worked. Well, there's two Florida guys, and they both work for me.
Good. Did they go back to Florida, or are we blessed to still have them here?
So the one that works in GSE is still on site, and then Mario Mazriegas is the one who works in quality control, and he will be returning.
So you've had an opportunity to be physically located in the Menzies offices at Hopkins, as you just stated. Do you see any written SOP procedures in the Menzies Cleveland office? Any copies?
They do have access to all of those.
No, I didn't ask if they have access. I asked if they physically have a printed copy.
They would not routinely maintain a printed copy because the most current edition is electronic.
Okay. So it's not a big difficulty to somehow acquire those and provide them to fire. Is that correct?
We absolutely can do that.
I didn't ask that. I asked if it's a big difficulty for Menzies to acquire them and so provide them to the fire department.
The local guys may not be able to do that in a reasonable format. We may have to get IT to extract them for you in a formatted version.
And you were present at the April 7th meeting with fire when Lieutenant Kelly said he wanted that information, correct?
I was not present at the April 7th meeting.
Oh, I thought you said you were present. I apologize. I thought you said you were there.
No, that was my first involvement as I got a phone call in regards to the meeting as it was ongoing.
Thank you for clarifying that. I took your testimony to state you were one of the people in the room. Thank
No,
you.
I was not.
I gotcha. So in the April 7th meeting, as Lieutenant Kelly indicated in his prior testimony, were you advised that he asked for that information from your people who were in the meeting?
No, I'm unaware that that request was made, and I did not discern that in the NOV.
Thank you. You didn't discern that he wanted documents and procedures?
Not specifically our SOPs or our manuals.
Okay. Were you advised from your people who were in the April 7th meeting that you were not present for, that he had said to the room that if you have another spill, I'm going to tag everything as cease use? Were you advised of that?
I don't know that I got it in those exact words, but I understood the discontent and the importance.
I just want to make sure what's being communicated, because it sounds like there's much like every area, city itself, there's big bureaucracies have communication issues. You are a worldwide company, correct?
We are.
And you provide fuel service, aircraft fuel servicing worldwide, correct?
We do.
And do you travel elsewhere to handle problems at other airports?
I do.
Have you seen anywhere else that you've traveled at other airports, the same problems or to the extent of the problems that you've seen at Cleveland?
It is exceedingly rare that we have a location or an operation that has this many challenges. But yes, I have been to other locations to do a recovery plan.
Were you aware that your own personnel in Menzies told Cleveland personnel that the city of Cleveland Hopkins Airport was the forgotten franchise?
Negative.
And were you aware that your personnel in Menzies have told the city of Cleveland personnel that we get the dumping grounds from Philly to Pittsburgh to Cleveland of all the equipment?
Negative.
I'm going to object to that as hearsay.
I asked if this board's allowed to have hearsay. It is a special statutory proceedings under the revised code, the rules of evidence under rule number 1, and the rules of procedure under rule number 1 are advisory and not mandatory, and this board regularly hears hearsay.
That's fine.
I'm just I'm noting your objection and the reason why I'm allowed to do it. So, Mr. Chairman, he has an objection to that.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Keith, were you aware of the large jet fuel spill that occurred on March 22nd?
I was.
How did you become aware of the March 22nd incident?
We have a requirement that every incident or accident gets reported through our integrated risk management system. We categorize those events based on their hazard and risk from A through D, Cat A being the highest, and based on the volume of this spill, it triggered a Cat A environmental report, and it came across as a text. That's how I became aware.
So you talked about the importance of prioritizing and feasibility and making sure things are being maintained. Were you aware that the driver reported to the city personnel that managed, quote unquote, Menzies management knew of the problems and failures of this particular truck involved in the March 22nd incident?
I read that in your response to our appeal. It was the first I'd heard.
Did you see the actual report and the written statement from the employee?
From your end?
The employee gave an actual written statement to Airport Fire, which was submitted in the filings. Have you seen that?
I do not recall seeing that, no.
Okay, that's fine if you haven't. Should you have seen it?
I should have, but I would say
Okay.
that one of the things that I would hope comes out of this is that we have a better partnership with environmental and ARF and city fire in regards to doing joint inspections and sharing information. There are a lot of reports, I think, that get generated that we don't have visibility to, and I'm not sure how that makes sense. A lot of information that I have in regards to this particular NOV, I only got after the fact, right? And so,
Right.
so I think we could do better, all of us, communicating and sharing information.
And would you agree that that would start with providing with Lieutenant Kelly those written procedures and SOPs that you indicate you guys have for some time that he's asked for?
I'm in agreement to provide Lieutenant Kelly anything that he's asked for as quickly
Me
as we
too.
can.
Yes, I tried to. I agree. Hopefully you do that and don't wait and just send it over. Contact him directly. Instead of discussing the SOP, I think I think I can speak for Lieutenant Kelly in the city, and they want you to provide it. And they're happy to discuss it, but they need it provided in order to discuss it. We don't draft the procedures. We're happy to review them as the code requires. Well,
Just an aside, just
Sure.
an aside. So Menzies maintains its own SOPs, right? And we do have SOPs for interplane fueling operations. Each carrier has their own FAA certificate, and part of their certificate includes their maintenance programs, and their maintenance programs typically include the fueling operations. So each individual airline has their own fueling manual. So while I can certainly provide the Menzies SOPs and training that supports that, if you want specific fueling procedures for type aircraft, those would come from the airlines.
Aren't those provided to you as their designated fuel supplier? Wouldn't that be part of your SOPs?
I will have access to that and I will train to that, but it wouldn't be my document to give away.
I see. So you're saying it's a proprietary issue between you and United. It's United's documents.
They are they would be airline documents.
Or Delta or whomever.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So do you have a separate SOP for your own maintenance of your own equipment though?
We also have a GSE manual. So GSE is equipment. So we have essentially a maintenance manual. We have preventive maintenance inspections. Those are also categorized. We have A through D checks, right? And those prescribe very specific inspections that get done on intervals, and the interval is typically quarterly. So for instance, first quarter, you may get an A check, second quarter, a B check, third quarter would be a C check, and fourth quarter is a D check. The D check is the heavy check. And so the plan in Cleveland is regardless of where they are in the cycle, they get 0 houred and they go straight into a heavy D so that we can get a baseline on that, like all that equipment.
And so that SOP procedures conform with the NFPA 407 maintenance schedule as well, or inspection and maintenance schedules that are provided under those chapters that are applicable?
Yes, our programs, I'm comfortable generally comply with NFPA 407. That's essentially the Bible for most of our operations.
And what is your opinion on how your SOP maintenance plan procedures, inspection, daily, et cetera, as you've described to this board in your testimony, how did that work for Menzies on the March 22nd fuel spill incident? Do you know?
So the spill that you had in March, my understanding is that there was a gate that we normally use that was out of service. We went through an alternate gate. Our guys misjudged. He hit a bollard, and the bollard had screws sticking out of it, and those punctured the tank. So the spill itself, I don't believe was caused by maintenance or lack thereof. Nonetheless, I could say that a view of the equipment overall would indicate that the maintenance and upkeep of the equipment is below Menzies standard.
So you're saying your testimony today is your understanding the March 22nd incident is that it was not a maintenance problem?
I don't know that the root cause was maintenance. No, I think it was driver error.
But contrary to what was reported in the report and contrary to what your own driver stated, that's what your testimony is to this board, correct?
No, I'm not suggesting that the driver told you something that was untrue. I'm just saying that I don't know that the cause and effect is the conclusion being drawn is correct. There could have been, could have been a driver error and a mechanical issue with the truck, but that doesn't make it causal.
Did Menzies do an investigation of that incident?
We investigate all incidents, yes.
Did you do an investigation of the March 22nd, 2022 jet fuel spill incident at Cleveland Hopkins Airport?
There is an investigation for that, yes.
Is it completed?
There is a process, there's a workflow. I will need to look and tell you, but we can certainly share that or follow up with it after this.
Well, are you aware that the law requires that investigation and report to be provided?
To whom?
Were you aware of the law that requires that?
No.
I will leave to whom to you and your counsel.
So
I'm
my
not going
understanding
to articulate about that. I asked if you were aware of.
that Airport Environmental concurred, we met with them, was that it was below the threshold requiring a report to the state.
Were you aware of the Ohio Fire Code or the Cleveland Fire Code requirements?
I am not negative.
Have you seen the city's state citation to Menzies that lists 14 items with corrective action?
I have, but I'm not. But
that's all I'm asking you to. This board has no jurisdiction over that notice.
Okay.
So that's all I'm asking you if you've seen it.
I have seen it.
How much? The board had previously asked how much fuel operation percentage-wise, just a general ballpark figure that Menzies provides at Hopkins. Are you aware of how much aircraft fuel servicing is provided at Hopkins overall?
I'm not following the question.
Do you know how much percentage-wise that Menzies provides fuel service to airlines at Hopkins? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? Is it 80%? Do you have any idea?
I don't know the answer to that, and I wouldn't want to speculate.
Do you have any knowledge as to the that whether or not Menzies is the primary fuel service provider to United or not?
Yes, we are.
Yes, you are. And what is the relationship between Menzies and United as it relates to providing resources to Menzies to provide such fuel servicing for United?
So I'm not sure that I'm following the question, but I'll give it a go. So United hires Menzies as an end-to-plane operator to provide into-plane fueling services. Part of the contract includes Menzies' operation and maintenance of some of the United assets, fueling assets.
And who determines the size or the physical location of Menzies' operation at the airport at Hopkins?
I don't understand that question.
Do you know who decides the physical space Menzies gets at the airport?
So we've leased some space, subleased some space from United, and I believe that the airport also designates areas for us to park equipment.
And do you also provide aircraft fueling services to other air carriers at Hopkins?
We do.
Are there air carriers that you do not provide fuel servicing to at Hopkins?
I don't know. I would have to ask my commercial guys.
Yeah. Ms. Aston?
Do you sublease? Pardon me?
Ms. Aston, I want to briefly take a moment here. Just your line of questioning, and I understand you're making a record, okay? But I'm not sure how relative it, okay, towards what we're going to be handling.
United argues that it's solely Menzies and not their responsibility, and this is Menzies' representative to testify as to the operations there as well. It's part of United's objections.
To their operations.
To United's operations, right?
Oh, to United's operations.
To United's operations.
Yes.
So one, I was eliciting as to United because part of United's appeal statement, Mr. Chairman, was, well, it's not just us, they provide it to everybody else. So that's why, if you don't want me to go, I won't go there if you don't want me to, Mr. Chairman. You're telling me to stop. That's fine.
Right, and I think we have.
I got you.
Yeah, okay.
That's fine. I'm more than happy to conclude. Not want to beat the horse with the fish, but that was my intent with that. It was not for any other purpose because United is saying that it's solely Menzies. So that was why I went there.
Okay. Thank you.
So as to the I'll go to the March 22nd reporting. Are you aware of any spill prevention procedures for Menzies in place at Hopkins?
We maintain a SPCC plan, a spill prevention control and countermeasure plan as required by US EPA. That plan was updated following a prior event. The plan was drafted by Woodard and Curran, who I hired to do that. And it's a pretty solid plan.
And it was updated in 2018, correct?
That sounds correct.
Were you aware of because it was after a very large spill of thousands of gallons?
I just volunteered that, yes.
Yeah, you did. I wasn't going to mention it. Were you aware it was because of the driver hitting something, driving it through the airport, dropping it at the Menzies location, turning in his badge and quitting?
I'm aware.
Now everybody else is, but you opened the door. I'm more than happy to walk through. You stated that your discussion with Airport Environmental on the March 22nd report indicated you didn't have to make any report regarding the amount wasn't enough to have to report. Am I encapsulating your testimony correctly?
Report to the state.
Report to the state. Okay. Were you aware of the state fire code that requires different dimensions for reporting to fire department? If you're aware or not, that's all I'm asking, if you're aware of it.
This is the initial report of the event. Yes. Yes, I'm aware. And we did that.
Okay. Just making sure. So you stated that you have done an investigation. I don't recall if you stated if it were concluded for the
I
March 22nd incident.
I told you there was a workflow, and I have to check the workflow to see if it's been
Gotcha.
completed.
Thank you for reminding me of that. You did state that testimony. As it relates to this, Mr. Chairman, I think that that's done. Thank you. I'm done.
All righty, thank you.
Mr.
Anyone else?
Chairman,
Yes,
we're going into 3 hours and I need about 5 minutes.
you go, okay. We're gonna take a little 5-minute break here. So anyone that has to use a restroom or whatever, go ahead.
The city is back, Mr. Chairman, for,
Okay,
thank you for your patience. I don't know if everyone else is, but I know the city is back.
okay.
This is Brandon. I'm back.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Amy Johnston for United, I'm back.
Okay. I think we have all the major players back.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mr. Bowen's not he had to step out for another meeting.
Okay.
So it's just
And I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Keith, who's very accommodating with us. So we have nothing further. Thank you.
You're good. Okay, very good. Okay, so you said we'd hear these cases together.
Mr. Chairman, in fairness to United, I don't know if United had any questions for Mr. Keith, but it would be in fairness to United.
Yes, I believe you're 100% correct. So Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. We do not have any questions for Mr. Keith, but I would like to just make a statement for United based on what was presented today. First, on United's behalf, United obviously values very much its relationship with the city. However, what you heard today is that Menzies supplies fuel to multiple carriers, not simply United. So it's not an exclusive relationship. And you also heard that Menzies agreed that they violated their own standard operating procedures. The notices of violation that were issued with respect to the spills and maintenance of the equipment. You didn't hear any evidence today that United maintains the equipment. In fact, Menzies readily agrees that they're in charge of maintenance of all of that equipment. And Lieutenant Kelly even said that United is not responsible for the spills. So in addition, the notices of violation, as we said earlier, were based on Chapter 181, which doesn't apply to United. So it's our position, even though this hearing occurred jointly, Mr. Chairman, that United has a separate contention that the notices were not properly issued to it because it cannot be held responsible for Menzies. There's no legal basis to do so.
Okay, is there any response, Ms. Aston, or are you going to hold?
Well, I wanted to make sure if she was done or if she had anything further, because then I can, is that it? You're all
I think
done?
she made her point.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I always have a response.
Sure you do.
16 years in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little levity. We reassert all of our prior statements that that United is required to follow all laws, and in the addition, their subcontracting, which Menzies does with their leases, are required to do so. 181, 183. I did not focus on 183. I'm happy to go back and provide it, but also the master lease agreement for the operations in Hopkins, as we previously argued. I'm not going to belabor it. All the previous arguments as to why they are responsible for the acts and omissions of their leasee. They did also own the carts. They were ownership of the carts. The testimony presented was United, in fact, brought new carts in. So they are a responsible party and properly identified, properly articulated by fire and cited. Thank you.
Yes, I did hear that. Well, let's see. So I think that we could find that the notice was, I guess we can find that the notice is properly issued because there is some responsibility there, I think, on United's part for at least some oversight. And we're going to probably need them too to make sure that Menzies is up to speed on what they're doing. And maintaining, what fire is asking for. So in that regards, and because like you said, they did mention that they own some carts and replaced some carts, they have some responsibility there. So I think we can find that it was properly issued. I do believe that I think we should give time. I listened to what Mr. Keith had to say, and he felt that within 60 days, they could abate all of that needs to be done. So I would recommend 60 days to abate the problem, and I would ask for a motion.
Discussion
Yes.
and clarification. For United, the city's always been clear that it's only as it relation to United's jet fuel operation, United's operation. We're not in any way saying United is any respect responsible for all of Menzies' operation that is not included in United's. So that we're clear. And again, we would object to the 60 days, but I want to be clear on that. It's United is only as it only with respect to their operations. Thank you, sir.
Well, if that's the case, we'll make that clear as a part of the motion, that it so states that, and that for Menzies, they have 60 days to abate the violation. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mr. Maschke.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dank.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. So
Yes.
Ms. Needs is going to be, their abatement part is their fleet and the cleanup of the spills. And United is going to be pertaining to the carts that they provided for Ms. Needs to operate.
Well, for the delivery of the fuel, I think is what Ms. Aston has stated. But it's more than that for Menzies. It's also on keeping their equipment up, on doing the underbody work they talked about, and complying with their own agreements that they have in place.
Okay.
And to provide the fire and work with fire, and to provide fire with that information so that they'll know exactly what their operating procedures are going forward. And they'll
Are you
have a
saying they have
copy.
60 days to provide that to the city? Because the city believes that's wholly unreasonable for 60 days. For those procedures to be, that already exist, to be provided.
No, they can, I'm sure they'll provide that.
I'm not.
To you.
I'm not.
You're not. Well,
I'm not. You've given them 60 days, sir. We would ask if you're going to articulate and separate out the documentation and the procedures that they themselves say exist somewhere. They shouldn't have 60 days to provide that.
Okay, well, we can amend that to be faster response on that for sure, for fire that they get within 2 weeks, May 11th, that they get over to them, that electronic copy over to fire, so that they can review what they're supposed to be doing. They'll have a copy of that in place. And to June 27th, 2022, both of those dates, to abate all of the things that they had talked about, that they said that they could get done.
Mr. Chairman, just for point of clarification, then, given the limited scope that Ms. Aston indicated with respect to United, and also the testimony that the carts that were mentioned by Lieutenant Kelly that have already been replaced and he's very happy about, we would ask for an amendment also to reflect that United has, if you're holding the violations were properly issued, that United has already abated the issues.
Yes, and that, so they, exactly, since you've abated the issues, then we're just giving time out there anyways. Your end of it's done. So
Thank you.
you're in good shape. You're
Subject to,
good.
and Mr. Chairman, subject to Fire's statement that United has to provide their procedures to ensure that their lessee is following the law. That was Lieutenant Kelly's testimony. That those
Is-
carts have been replaced, but this is not mere paperwork. These are operating procedures to ensure the law is being followed. So to any extent that United is required, and Lieutenant Kelly gave that testimony, that they have to provide their procedures to ensure that there is compliance in the future.
Ms. Johnson, are you able to do that within 2 weeks?
Mr. Chairman, I asked Lieutenant Kelly this question specifically. I asked him if Menzie provides those procedures, the standard operating procedures, would that mean compliance of all the notices of violation? And he said yes. So it's my understanding United doesn't have to provide anything. The time period you're giving Menzies to provide the procedures is what I understood from Lieutenant Kelly is what he was looking for.
Lieutenant Kelly should still be on if you want him to clarify.
Lieutenant Kelly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, did you hear that conversation?
Yes, I did. And I would ask that United would send something in the way of an SOP from their airline as well, because we are going to be going back to the airport and asking each individual airline for their SOPs on fueling that they would provide to Menzie to follow.
Ms. Johnson?
So just so I'm clear, it's the SOPs that we've already given Menzies on the fueling that you would like from us.
Yes, for your airline, just your airline.
Thank you. Yes, 2 weeks is fine.
Okay. All right. So this.
I have one question. So was due on May 11th, 2022 is the SOP, which means standard operational procedures just regarding fueling. Is that the right terminology? Patty, Lieutenant?
So I'm going to defer to Lieutenant Kelly, but it's my understanding United's SOP is specific to their operating procedures for their airline. But the Menzies SOP and procedures is relations to not just the fueling, but the inspection and maintenance of their equipment. And I would defer to Lieutenant Kelly if that is correct.
That is correct.
Training, maintenance, all their SOPs that the law requires.
Correct.
Lieutenant Kelly or Lieutenant Telvine, after this, can you guys email me the specific terminology of those wordings that you want in the resolution so I can make sure that is clear when I issue the resolution to Ms. Mead and United Airlines?
And make sure you copy me so that I can make sure to give that information to the council when you send it to Ms. Davis, okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Maskey, to the changes that we've had in the motion.
Yes, so moved.
Okay, and Mr. Dank.
Second.
Second. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Maskey,
Yes.
Mr. Dink,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, Mr. Gallagher.
Yes. Okay, so I guess the notice will be sent out within 2 weeks of what the order is.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your diligence on this, Mr. Chairman. The city greatly appreciates it. And the city does also greatly appreciate the time, diligence, and attention that the parties, United and Menzies, has given to this as well. I know we're all interested in the safety of the public, but this really was that important. And that's why we're thankful that you gave this time to us today.
Well, that's what we're here for. Thank you. Okay, is there let's see, we do have some more business to take care of.
We do.
Yeah, okay. The other parties, you're excused. You're all set.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
You bet. Okay, so we have approval of resolutions, A6921, A7621, A8821, A10621, A12421, A12521, A12621, A12721, A12821, A12921, It's actually all the way through A13521. Motion?
Move approval.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Call the roll.
Second.
Mr. Maskey,
Yes.
Mr. Dink,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, Mr. Gallagher.
Yes. Okay, we have approval of the minutes for March 30th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections?
Motion detected in the front yard.
It should state, approval of minutes from April 13th.
Oh,
That was,
okay, approval of minutes for April 13th, 2022. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was okay.
that was you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Very good. Are there any additions or corrections?
No.
Okay. Motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Maskey,
Yes.
Mr. Dink,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley, Mr. Gallagher.
Yes. Okay, we don't have any further business. We are now adjourned. Thank you all.
Stay on all day?
Might as well.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Kevin. Thank you
Honestly,
very much. Appreciate
so
your
sorry,
input.
but thank you all. It has been, and to Ms. Lipscomb, these are not what usually happen.
I'd like to mention that CBO Vanover sat through that whole thing and didn't get to say a word.
It was so
Wait, no, I didn't need to. Wait, is
Torturous.
Fire gone too? I think Fire's gone too.
I just want my thank you.
Come on in, Billy. It's been a hell of a month at sea. It's really been a hell of a month. So.
Tom, Patty made up for all of us.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yes, you
Seriously, it was encapsulated to the smallest amount possible. Believe it or not.
I thought you were going to start going into some murder charges on Mr. Keto. Holy
He
smokes,
opened
where'd
the
you
door
go?
and I walked through it. I mean,
Patty, you were in your glory.
no,
Yeah.
I hate this. Honest to God.